I want to talk now about the designation and just kind of go through it. Has anybody in this group done one? No? Okay. Okay. Well, I hope that it's not overwhelming. We're trying to get a little information about the cemetery. Obviously, you know, it would be great to do a mapping and to get every stone and to photograph every stone, but that's not really the purpose. The purpose is to get started, to get it in the deed records. And so we just need a little information about it. So it may seem overwhelming, but it's really just the minimum amount that we feel that we need to evaluate it, and it's a good start.
How could you find out if it's already been designated?
Well, you can either call us or on our website, the THC website under the Atlas. You can click on that and then you go to the county and you can take out the National Register and the sawmill survey and just get down to cemeteries and markers, and then you can look into that county and see if it's listed. It's kind of a little difficult. It tells you when it's been designated. There's listings and you'll have to look at each one to see if it's been designated.
But you wouldn't want to go to all this trouble.
Well, and actually we got our first one in about 3 weeks ago. After 1,200 applications, we got one in that had been already designated about 4 or 5 years ago. So I guess out of 1,200, actually we've probably done 1,300 that are in process. I think that's pretty good. Yeah, and most people just call us or they're aware of it. I mean, obviously with 50,000 cemeteries and we've only done 1,200, it's probably a pretty good chance it hasn't been, but we'll be glad to check, because yeah, we'd hate to, I wrote them a letter, you know, I just apologized and just said, you know, this is the first time this has happened. I'm sorry for all the work you've done. Yeah.
So it's like a unique number given to each?
Yes, yeah, we have it by unique number by county. We have a county abbreviation system that the archaeologists started years ago, and so we do that plus C and then a number, and we've created in the cemeteries that we've surveyed, we've created those numbers, so we'll just add that to it when you apply. If you're doing a county-wide effort, we'd be glad to look at the county, look at the cemeteries you've listed, because we've had some people that have gone ahead and put their own numbering system, and then we've got our own numbering system, and then we have to have a coordination between the two.
What about an official state site number for the cemetery?
That's the archaeological?
Yeah, well, it's 41, NA.
Right. Let us know that. You know, when I created the program, I looked at that form thinking, well, maybe we could just do that form for everybody, but when I really looked at it, it looked pretty complicated, and so well, but it's just general. We probably have other questions that we want to ask for cemeteries. So we put that, if I know it, I put it on the map that's recorded. So if somebody sees that number, they know what it is, and they can go back and look at it. So that's where we got this sort of unique numbering system. And the C was for cemetery. We decided we put that in, that people would know that it was a cemetery.
In the number, is it C41NA?
No, it's just the county, and then C, and then we just go. We've got 3 digits.
So it'd be NAC.
Yeah.
24.
24. Yeah.
Doesn't have the state.
No, we didn't put that on. Let me go through the form quickly. Obviously, some of this stuff's fairly simple, but a few things I want to note. Primary name. That's really the name it's going to be registered, and if you're the 37% that's going to go ahead and get a marker, be sure that's the right name you want to use, because if it isn't, you're going to have to go through the process again. And we just had one not too long ago that it got registered several years ago, and it's not the name that the group wanted. It needed to be a hyphenated name, and they only had one name, so we had to go through that process. And if it's called other names, please put that in. Sometimes in the old deeds will indicate a name of a cemetery that's not used anymore. So I really want to know about those and put that in. The record is 8 names for one cemetery, so we're looking for a record-breaking 9, but I'm not sure when that will happen. But, and then we just want the information about who filled out the form and your contact information, especially like email, because we try to do that, and instead of mailing you something, we try to, if we've got questions when we're reviewing the application, then we want to get back with you. So that just helps us get to you quicker. Location is, again, just fill out. If you don't know the longitude, latitude, we can certainly take care of that. We have a program that we can, a mapping program, we can get that. We put that on the map too. And then information, if there is an association and a contact person, so we have that. And at the bottom, the deeds. If you have deeds, give us the volume and page for those. And we probably like a copy. We have a software program on our computer, and if we type in the meets and bounds, it just draws the cemetery up. We've had 3 cases where, this is north, cemetery is rectangular east-west. When I did the deed, it was rectangular north and south. So, and they'd had the deeds for years, nobody just really looked at them and ran them out. I think there was a church here, and they just started burying behind the church and didn't realize that the deed was really a north-south orientation instead of east-west. So we found it out, and you know, they're working with the surrounding landowner right now to deal with that, but at least we know it now. So, and it's good to have copies of the deed. Sometimes associations don't. Well, I think we have one. You know, doing this process, then you find out who gave you the additional land or how much it is and that kind of thing. So it's good to pull that information together. On the second page at the top is the surrounding landowners. You can get that from the appraisal district, and at the same time get a map from them that shows it. Now, it may not have the cemetery, but you can at least get the surrounding landowners. And we don't want the landowners across the street here. We do want these that have common boundaries with the cemetery, okay? And I don't know what this creek, somebody said there's a creek back here, so I don't know who owns that, but we do want to know that. We contact them so that they're aware about the designation. We're not asking for approval. We're just trying to make them aware of what we're doing and sort of, you know, hint that this is an important resource and that the state thinks it's important. And we've had cases where they've come forward, a rural case where they've come forward and said, well, if you'll go by the fence, we'll put it up around it. If you're going to go through the designation process, we think it ought to be protected better than it is now, and so we'll help you. So there are some cases like that. Sometimes we get calls because they think they're going to, you know, they won't be able to use the land around the cemetery, and we don't. No, that's not the case. But we obviously want to, you know, the issue of an unfenced cemetery, we want to address that issue if there's unmarked graves around it or not. So that's the surrounding landowners. If there is any markers in the cemetery, or if the cemetery has a marker, a subject marker, then we want to know that. And then if there's any nearby THC markers that might be a couple blocks away that talk about the city or something like that. And then we get into the checks here of surrounding land use, and if it's level or sloped. Cemetery access, we talked about that at the session there. We want to know, you know, can you drive into it? Is there a problem? Is there a gate? And that kind of thing. And then cultural and religious heritage, if you know it, fill that out. And then up on page 3 is landscaping. I know I'm not a landscape architect, but we wanted again to get a little information. So put down what kinds of trees, you know, if it's natural, then they were there before. If you think they're planted, then they're cultural. And put them, the shrubs, ground cover, if you've got iris, whatever. This would just be grass here for ground cover. We're just trying to get some information about the cemetery. The perimeter is a perimeter fence. So in this case, we've got chain link, and I guess this is, we could just put a hedgerow or whatever here. And the rough dimensions of the cemetery. When you do the map, put that dimension on the map. You know, you're going to do a simple little map that shows the boundaries.
Can you do a pace?
Yeah, I mean, on something like this, if it's smaller, than, you know, if you can run a steel tape, yeah, and it's, you know, less than 100 feet, I would do that. Yeah, I would just pace this out. I mean, in this case, you've got an urban setting. it's not like it's sitting out in the middle of the field. This is not going to move, and I think the encroachment's already happened if there was any. So the appraisal district generally has, in the urban areas, have dimensions, so you can get the dimensions off of their maps and see if it looks right to you. So it's the rural ones that we're more concerned about getting the dimensions, and then if it's sitting in the middle of 30 acres, I really want to get a dimension from that cemetery to something that's a permanent landmark, a fence line or something else. Yeah, a road or something like that. And I would probably just get the center of the road. That's generally the best thing to do.
Yeah, there's a small cemetery in a field here on the house and stuff. And there's not a fence, but somebody has laid out like stone, like you could step over the very small stuff, the perimeter thing. Would that be listed if you were going to do that, like on the fence, under the fence thing? Because it doesn't really keep anybody. It just sort of indicates a boundary.
Yeah, I would probably indicate that. But again, also look to see if that assumption is that you think that all the markers are inside that or not.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And if there's a real question, what we can do is when I do the map, I put a preservation zone around the edge and say to the landowner that if you're going to do any disturbance in there, there may be graves, unmarked graves here, and just put it to their attention. And I sort of have to decide if it's going to be 20 feet or 50 feet or whatever. And just sort of let them know, because you get a fence up there, that's great, but then somebody may have put a fence up 30 years ago and that's great, kept the cattle out. Well, they just put a fence around where the stones were, and or sometimes it's a low spot, and so they went around it, and it's like, well, because it's a low spot. And I said, well, why did you cut off the fence? Well, because it's a low spot. And I said, well, are there any graves? No, we don't know. So now those graves are outside, and over time that fence sort of, everybody thinks that's the property line or the perimeter. So we need to really know that kind of thing, because we don't want to go through those efforts and then leave some graves out, and then somebody runs a pipeline through there later on. And then of course when the materials, and then the age and context. Do you know how many graves there are? What's the oldest? Is the cemetery still active? Are there unmarked graves? Are there graves with no dates? Dated graves? And then if there is an inventory, where would it be? And then the next one is condition. Those pretty easily explained. And then we'll go down and look at some materials in a minute here. And then cemetery features. We just wanted to, if you entry gate, if you know who made it, or if it was bought out of a catalog, it might say Stewart Ironworks, Cincinnati, Ohio. And then what the material's made out of. And then you get into things like curbing. I think we've seen concrete, we've seen brick curbing here. And you might have stone. Probably this part of the world, you probably don't have as much stone because you had to haul that in. It's more concrete and brick. And sometimes you find wood too, or more contemporary. And then what the materials are for the roads and the paths, if it's segregated. And then features of benches and flagstone, flagpole, and those kind of mausoleum and obelisk. We'll discuss that today. And then on the fourth page at the top is the veterans. If you know what wars they fought in, then that would be included there. And then the history, you can either do it on here or you can just use an attachment to another page. So we just want a basic paragraph history of the cemetery, and we do need a bibliography, where you got the information. You don't have to have a footnote. So it might be the deed, there might be a published history of the town and it's got a little information about it. You might do oral history, talk to somebody that's been around a long time that's associated with it, and write down their name and phone number, or name and date that it was done. And I'd certainly, if they've got some information, type it up when you get through so that it's formal, so you've got it down the line, because some of that information is just not written down anywhere. When that individual dies, we lost forever. So then the checklist here, you have the black and white photographs. I didn't really go into a lot of detail, but on a cemetery if you have a small cemetery, we just need a photograph of the entry, and it is in the guidelines. an entry, because we use that picture on our atlas on our website to get an idea of what it looked like. And then we like to have the corners photographed inward so that we have a sense, is it flat? Is it a formal cemetery? Are there a lot of missing areas? Does it look like there's an older section and then a newer section? On something like this, I would get the four corners, and then I would go out in the center and take from the center out toward the corners. So you have 8, 10 photographs like that. When we used to have film, we had 24 exposures. So I said, well, the other 10 or 12, just go get the oldest markers or the most interesting ones and just get a sampling. So you can still do that with the digital if you want to, just to give a sense of some of them. There's some, you know, we like to see them too, because there are really some fascinating markers out there. And they don't have to be manufactured, you know, I mean, they can be homemade markers too, because there's some really unique concrete ones and some really fascinating ones out there. The map is just, you know, again, it kind of depends upon what you have. You know, if it's out in a field, you're going to have to just do a little sketch of it, get the north arrow on, and give us the dimensions, and go to some landmark if you can, and indicate if it's stone around it, or if it's got a chain link fence or whatever, that kind of thing. And I would, in that case, I don't think the appraisal district map, which you need to get, I don't think that's probably shown on there. Probably not. So you need to mark it on there. Probably the best thing to do is to do MapQuest or one of the websites and get their aerial photographs and get down as far as you can and photograph it and mark on there where the cemetery is the best you can. You know, kind of Google Maps, some of them are, you know, they're using existing stuff. In some parts of the state they're really detailed, and I know in this part I was really disappointed. I zoomed down and got all that green very quickly. If you're around Dallas-Fort Worth, the Council of Governments has 14 counties. There are color photographs. They're updated every 2 years, and if you have a cemetery like this, you can go down and see every stone, and it's free. So you don't have to download a whole map on your on your computer. You can just look at it and zoom down. So we're not, I wish the whole state was that way, but we don't. It kind of varies, but look around. I put in here a single form, and there's a lot of them out there. You can find them online, and if you get, we don't require every stone to be surveyed for as part of the designation process, but that's something that we recommend down the line to start doing. And you might just take, you know, I mean, if you got a big cemetery like this and you've got a group starting, it's going to be kind of overwhelming. So, you know, you might just take that road and do that whole section there, and, you know, call that as, you know, section A or something, and finish that, and then at least you have accomplished that you felt that you finished one whole section. It's good because it's documenting the actual individual stones, and I would tie this in with the photographs and come up with a numbering system so that the photographs and the forms are tied together. And if you're going to do any work, I know last weekend they did some cleaning. Was anybody here last week? Yeah, you did the cleaning down there of some stones. Then it ought to be put on the form here that you cleaned it, what year it was. Materials like marble and granite, you shouldn't clean them every 2 years. You should not be cleaning, because every time you clean them, if you collect the water and look at the bottom of it, you'll find little granules, pieces off that stone. So every time you clean it, you do remove a little bit of that material. So, and if you did any repairs, we'd like to know. Obviously, everybody in the association, Cemetery Association, knows today that that stone was repaired. Well, in 20 or 30 years, they may not. And you would put in there, you know, that you use stainless steel pins or dowels in it or whatever, use epoxy, whatever. So we have that information there. Also, this form is good when you have a cemetery this size. Then you get some kind of idea of which stones need what work. Because it's really difficult to go around and just decide, you know, if you got $5,000, what are you going to do with it to work on the stones? So in this way, you've got a form, you can go through and pull out the markers that are leaning or are damaged, so then you can start going back. And also the process of filling this out, you really get to look at the stone. You know, I mean, just to walk by it is one thing, but when you really start filling it out, you go, oh gosh, there's a crack there, or that corner, that piece of it is missing, and I wonder what happened. And so it makes you want to look at, it makes you go through the process of really looking at the stone when you're doing it.
Does that information go in y'all's database?
We would really ask you to keep it within the association. We don't really have the capacity to do that. And you know, and that brings up a good point. That if you're going to do some of that, you know, I probably would make a second copy and put it at the public library or something like that. You know, I mean, the kind of some of these things have been destroyed by taken home and their house burns down, or they have a flood or something else like that. So that information, you should probably make a second copy, get it at the library, that kind of thing, so we have it. You've done all that effort. We don't want it to be lost over time.